we are in the 6.5 quiz. I'm going to try to go fast. Remember, go ahead and put me on 2 times speed to listen. And we are going to go through our quiz for today. So, grief may be the result of a death. However, it may also be a response to failures, lost relationships, moves, and job losses. This comes up multiple times. The answer is true. So grief is not just about death. It's about any type of loss. So individuals have higher divorce rates in second marriages and subsequent marriages. That is absolutely true. One of the things in research that they have found is that once you have gone through a divorce, your shyness or concern about going through another one, your inhibition to go through a divorce is less. Also, if there were things that you didn't work out in your first marriage, there are people who just marry another person who can be very similar to that. They haven't still figured out how to communicate or to work with another person. And so those communication skills are what they are looking at as the reason for that higher divorce rate. Mark all that apply. You can see that all of them apply. The outcomes of divorce are worse when children have to focus on caring for themselves because the parents aren't able to, when children are forced to care for their parents. So it's bad enough if they have to care for themselves, but if they have to care for their parent, that it decreases it. As we talked about ACEs in other classes, this is one of the reasons why it would be an ACE is if some of these things are in the family structure at that time. Parents engage in a bitter or prolonged legal battle, so that inconsistency or not knowing what's going to happen or animosity between parents is complicated. Or if one or both of the parents just completely disappear, that also isn't helpful. So the right answer is to have absolutely all of those marked. All right. Our second, I'm going to move this to see if you can see me better. Like that. There we go. Which statement is not a best practice? So best practice is to marry someone who is willing to support your children as a first priority in your life, because they will be. If you're going to do what we just said in the divorce section up above in terms of, helping your child, having your child not have to care for themselves, then your new partner has to know that they're going to be a first priority for you. Marry someone if you only marry someone if you can live with their children being a top priority in their life. So it works both ways. And then also never make selfish decisions with the illusion that you are doing the best thing for your children. Ask a neutral party to help you evaluate your decision making so that the children aren't an excuse for really making a decision that's about you and not necessarily about the kids. So with that said, the answer, because this is not a good practice, the answer you want to mark is marrying someone who can respond to your children's jealousy and need for value by acting out on their own jealousy to need to be valued. So we want the adult that is getting into the marriage relationship to be the adult in the scenario. It's kind of the big one. So what is its best if there is fighting between two parents and it takes two people in a relationship, and so you can't control that other partner, but if there is fighting, then getting professional help to learn how to work respectfully as co-parents so you can put the children first is a best practice. What happens is when you divorce, if you didn't communicate well, there's a lot more, almost even more communication that occurs when there is divorce and you're trying to co-parent out of 2 houses and 2 sets of rules and that sort. So communication is key. This next question, question 6, as soon as possible, a step-parent should do whatever they can to establish a bond with their stepchildren. So I was excited that some of you have already taken the quiz, because I got to see that this question was actually frequently missed. And one of the reasons why we want to be like, oh, we all want to love each other, and that's great and amazing, but children need time, and they have found that when step parents hop in and they want to be like best buds right away, and they want to feel like they're, you know, part of being a parent right away in that situation, that children tend to have more negative feelings towards that step parent and animosity towards that step parent, because you haven't been there as long as they have. At that rate, that 10-year-old child or 6-year-old child has more experience with your, you know, with the person that the step parent is marrying, than they do. And so they recommend that you have a nice, slow, not forced or pressured, a chance to build a relationship that goes at the child's speed, not at the parents, not at the adult speed. So the rate of relationship is based on what the child wants. That's the reason why it is false. So the adult is meant to consistently be open, but the rate and how soon that happens really is depending upon the child, and speeding into it is not helpful. Okay. Acculturation is the process in which an individual adapts, acquires, and adjusts to their environment. There is I like to say there's some things that are not good, bad, they just are. So it's amazing to feel like you've built a new community if you have come from another country. And you've adapted, you've acquired, you've adjusted to the new environment, and you feel like, wow, this could be my home, and this feels like my new home. In one way, there's nothing wrong with that acculturation. Acculturation could also be that you spend so much time trying to adapt and adjust and be different that you lose the richness that you had in your culture, that you had before. And so in that way, then acculturation could feel like a negative thing or not such a good thing. So at any time, it could potentially be good or bad. So I like to just bring awareness to that and to the certain circumstances, and that there isn't necessarily a right or wrong. It's what a family wants. And also, each individual in the family could have different levels of acculturation, how much they want to adapt and join a new culture versus how much they want to stick and stay with the rich tradition of the culture that perhaps they were born with. So again, either way is amazing. I love to give people the freedom to make that choice for themselves without any judgment on any of our part. If I find that people are judged if they acculturate too much or if they don't do it enough, and I like to take people and give them the option, and you can do whatever it is that suits you and your family. And I take you and accept you where you're at with that. So I recommend that that's a great way to handle and to come at individuals from different cultures. Okay, question number 8 we're on. Which of the following statements best describes a child's needs of a child from a military family? The military families, and actually with cultures and with step families, one of the biggest pieces that I found was missing in some people's answers for the quiz is that consistency is so helpful. It helps transition. So consistency with how you're running your family. If you have a new member that comes into the family, like a stepfather or stepmother, consistency is helpful. If you have a military family, what you're trying to do is keep everything as very similar as possible as it was before this big event of a change in their life, of a family member leaving and being deployed for a while. So they need consistency with routine that they've always had. You want to maintain a child's view of the world. We're not trying to change we're trying to keep everything as consistent as possible. And the fun time, and continue to still have fun without the deployed parent. That we don't have to be sad every day because they're gone. We can acknowledge sadness. We can also have fun and keeping things consistent. The first answer is not right, because if you try as many new activities as you can, you're not really creating or maintaining that consistency and that stability that really helps to reduce stress. So you're trying to create consistency. And that'll come up a little bit further in another one of our answers that there was quite a few missed answers on. Unique challenges of immigrant parents are deciding about acculturation. Which pieces of your culture do you keep and which pieces do you modify? That's a big question, and it's a challenge, and different communities accept people in different ways according to it as well. So it's very hard. Learning how to navigate our education system, and that is extremely difficult, and also dealing with conflicts that may arise from their children and how they adapt to the culture sometimes sooner than parents do, in terms of end up having those children help the parents learn the language or help the parents do the paperwork, and then that it is an added pressure on that child. Again, there's pressures in all families. This is just one of the pressures of an immigrant family. Military families have unique stressors related to separation, reunification. That's when a deployed parent comes back into the family structure. It's another change. So even though it's a happy change that they're back, it can be a very hard change to figure out what the rules are. They've tried to make it really consistent. Usually those that are at home have a very stable environment. They get into a new structure and stride, and then somebody else comes in living with them. It's new. Very similar to step families. Someone else new comes into the house, it's living with them. There's going to be a reunification time, a time really where you're trying to figure out. With military families, you're trying to refigure it out, a reunification. With new families that are brand new together, they're just trying to unify. Like, how do we make a whole out of two separates? Again, with that first question, we don't want to push it. We can go at the speed that the child wants to go. And finally, the fear of death is very hard for children and spouses. We're thinking of which one doesn't apply. So what does apply is when children are grieving, we want to take them to funerals and memorials. That's totally fine. We can create rituals and remembrance for the child to help comfort them in other times. We can be prepared for a child to regress, and sometimes they don't at all. We also need to be super patient and comforting. What we do want to do is we want to use words like death and dead, be very explicit. And so trying not to use those words is absolutely not what you want to do. So we want to use words like death and death. We don't want to use words like, oh, she's sleeping or went on a happy trip or something of that sort, because it's very confusing for young children who take things very literally. All of the above. So mark the symptoms of ways to express grief. And in fact, hyperactivity, which was a lot of questions for some of you, is a way a child can express grief. And so it is important to remember that during times, if you're in school and you have a teacher being like, oh, there's, your kid might have hyperactivity disorder. I want you to be thinking that stress and grief can actually be a cause of that. So if you've had a lot of loss in your life, then hyperactivity is one of those things that shows up. So that could be temporary and not biological. And I want just to remember that. Children only experience grief from the death of a loved one. That is absolutely false. It can be from a move, from a deployment, from many other things. Mark the strategies that step parents should follow to create harmony in a blended family.